She wanted to die, but I held her and said, "Not today." Rain poured down from the alien sky, each drop glowing faint blue under the strange lights of the city. The streets below were empty, silent, except for the hum of hovering ships far above. The air smelled of metal and smoke, mixed with something sharp that burned the nose. Daniel, a human captain stranded after a failed mission, walked slowly along the high bridge. The bridge was old and cracked, stretching over a deep river of glowing energy. The current below moved like liquid lightning, dangerous enough to kill anyone who fell through the heavy rain. Daniel saw her, a tall alien girl, standing right at the edge, her back to him, her long silver hair plastered to her shoulders. She wore torn clothes that clung to her thin frame, and her bare feet were bleeding on the rough metal floor. She didn't move when thunder rolled above, didn't flinch when a cold wind rushed over the bridge. Daniel froze for a moment, watching her. Something about her stillness sent a shiver down his spine. Her arms hung loosely by her sides, but her fingers trembled. She leaned forward slightly, just enough that the glowing mist from the river touched her face. "Hey," Daniel called softly, his voice almost lost in the storm. She turned her head halfway, just enough for him to see her profile. Her skin was pale like moonlight, her eyes a deep shade of blue, but they were empty. The kind of empty Daniel had seen before in people who had given up. "Stay back," she said quietly, her voice almost broken. "I'm just here to talk," Daniel replied. Taking one slow step forward, she shifted her weight closer to the edge, the wind tugging at her hair. "I said, stay back, human," she repeated, but there was no real anger in her tone, just pain. Daniel noticed something then. Her wrists had glowing shackles around them, broken but still sparking. The skin under them was raw, marked by burns and deep cuts. Rainwater mixed with blood as it dripped down her hands. "You're hurt," Daniel said, taking another step. "It doesn't matter," she replied without looking at him. Her voice cracked when she added, "It's better this way." Daniel's jaw tightened. He had heard those words before, and he knew where they led. Ships passed far overhead, their engines echoing through the air. None of them stopped. None of them cared. The city lights flickered in the distance, casting strange shadows across the bridge. Daniel kept his eyes on her, his boots splashing in shallow puddles as he moved closer. "What happened to you?" he asked. "Nothing you can fix," she said, almost to herself. Daniel's hand curled into a fist. "Maybe not," he admitted, "but I can listen." She laughed weakly, a sound more like a sob. "I don't need a listener, human. I need to disappear." She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Leaning forward, Daniel's heart kicked hard in his chest. He could almost see her falling. The glowing river below waited like a silent mouth, ready to swallow her. "No," Daniel said sharply, moving fast. In one motion, he reached out and grabbed her wrist. Her eyes flew open in shock. The rain fell harder, lightning flashing above them. "Let go," she cried, twisting in his grip. "Not today," Daniel said, his voice firm. Her foot slipped on the wet metal, and suddenly they were both half over the edge. The cold wind roared in their ears. Daniel planted his other hand on the railing, pulling with all his strength. She struggled, not out of real fight, but out of despair. Her eyes locked on his, and for a moment, Daniel saw it, the depth of her hopelessness, the shadows of something terrible she had survived. He pulled harder, his muscles burning, until she stumbled back onto the bridge floor. They both fell to their knees, breathing hard, rain soaking their clothes. "Why?" she asked, her voice almost a whisper. Daniel stared at her, water dripping from his hair into his eyes. "Because someone once stopped me," he said. For the first time, her gaze broke away from the river. She looked at him as if trying to understand. In the distance, a faint sound began to rise, mechanical, sharp. Daniel turned his head and saw faint lights moving through the rain on the far side of the bridge. Figures were coming closer, tall and armored, their weapons glowing. The girl's eyes widened in panic. They found me, she whispered. Her voice trembled now for a different reason. If they take me, it's worse than death. Daniel's grip on her wrist tightened again. Then we run, he said simply. She hesitated, staring into his eyes for a long second. Finally, she nodded. The sound of the approaching figures grew louder. The rain fell like sheets of silver, hiding them in a curtain of mist, and together, they vanished into the shadows at the far end of the bridge. Rain still clung to their faces as they ran, the bridge fading behind them into the storm. Daniel's boots splashed in deep puddles, the alien girl's bare feet leaving faint trails of blood on the wet pavement. Neon signs flickered above narrow streets. Strange alien symbols glowing red and green, steam rising from vents in the walls. The city felt alive but dangerous, every shadow watching them, every corner holding a threat. She stumbled once, almost falling, but Daniel caught her arm before she hit the ground. Her breath came in quick, shallow bursts. You shouldn't. Help me, she managed between gasps. They'll kill you too. Daniel only tightened his grip and kept moving. His eyes scanned the streets ahead, looking for somewhere to hide, somewhere they could vanish. The sound of armored boots echoed. Behind them, growing louder, sharp orders shouted in an alien tongue. The girl's head jerked back in fear. They're close, she whispered. Daniel pulled her into a side alley, the walls so tight their shoulders scraped the metal. A sharp hiss filled the air as a hovering surveillance drone floated down in front of them. Its glassy eye blinked, red scanning their faces. Daniel reacted first, swinging his arm hard. The drone cracked against the wall and fell to the ground, sparks bursting from its body. The light from the destroyed machine lit the girl's face for a moment, and Daniel saw how truly frightened she was. Not just for herself, but for him too. Name, Daniel said, as they moved again. Lyra, she replied quietly. He kept his voice low. What did you do to make them hunt you? She didn't answer at first. Her eyes stayed forward, fixed on the wet pavement. Finally she said, I refused to marry him. Daniel frowned. That's it. Lyra shook her head. Not just refused. I ran. I shamed him in front of his people. She touched the broken shackles on her wrists. He won't forgive it. They turned a corner and entered a wide market street, glowing with strange lights, even in the rain. Tall alien merchants stared at the sight of a human holding the arm of a girl marked as a fugitive. Some whispered, some just watched, but none stepped forward to help. Daniel felt the weight of every gaze. The way people stepped back, as if they didn't want to be near whatever was about to happen. From above, a thin beam of light swept the street. A searchcraft was moving slowly, scanning each face. Daniel pulled Lyra under a canvas awning. The smell of hot alien food heavy in the air. Steam curled between them, hiding their shapes for a few seconds. The craft passed, but Daniel knew it wouldn't be long before the next one came. Lyra's voice was trembling now. You can still leave me here. Just walk away and they'll forget you. Daniel looked at her sharply. I'm not leaving you. She stared at him for a moment, as if trying to believe it. Then the air filled with a sharp metallic alarm. Someone had spotted them. Daniel grabbed her hand and ran again, weaving between stalls and overturned crates. Behind them, the armored boots were louder now, the voices angrier. One of the hunters fired, a glowing bolt slamming into the ground beside them, spraying sparks. Lyra flinched but kept running. A narrow opening appeared between two tall storage towers. Daniel pushed her through it, pressing his back to the wall as the hunter's shadows passed just meters away. They waited there, silent except for the sound of their breathing and the rain dripping off the metal roof above. When it seemed clear, Daniel led her deeper into the dark. The city's noise faded behind them, replaced by the low hum of underground machinery. Pipes ran along the walls, leaking steam into the air. Somewhere far below, Daniel could hear water rushing. Lyra walked close now, her arm brushing his with each step. They won't stop, she said quietly. They'll chase me until I'm gone. Daniel glanced at her. the dim light catching in her wet hair. "Then we make sure you're never gone," he replied. Her eyes widened just slightly, as if no one had ever said that to her before. Ahead, a faint light glowed at the end of the tunnel. Daniel slowed, pulling her behind a large pipe, peering out. He saw the shapes of more armored soldiers moving toward them from the far side, trapped between two groups. Lyra's hand gripped his tightly. The hum of the machines grew louder, and Daniel's mind raced for a way out as the hunters closed in from both ends. The rain outside felt far away now, and the air in the tunnel seemed to thicken, as if the city itself was holding its breath. The tunnel air was heavy, damp, and warm, steam curling up from cracks in the floor as Daniel pulled Lyra deeper into the shadows. The faint orange glow ahead flickered like firelight, but the heat felt wrong, artificial. It wasn't fire, it was the exhaust vents of the alien war machines rumbling above. The sound of boots echoed from behind, slow and careful now. Not the rush of a chase, but the steady advance of hunters who knew their prey had nowhere left to go. Lyra's grip tightened on his hand, her skin still cold despite the heat. Daniel glanced back and caught her eyes. They were wide, alert, scanning the darkness like a cornered animal. "This way," she whispered, tugging him toward a narrow crack in the wall, barely wide enough for a person to slide through. Daniel hesitated. He didn't like small spaces, but the glow from behind was getting closer. He turned sideways and pushed in, the sharp edges of the wall scraping his jacket. On the other side, the air changed, colder now, smelling faintly of mold and rust. They were in an older section of the underground, one where the metal floor was patched with slabs of stone, and strange alien symbols were carved into the walls. Lyra kept moving, her bare feet silent on the damp ground. "You've been here before," Daniel said quietly. She didn't answer right away. Finally she nodded. "When I was a child, before I was taken to the capital." Her voice was flat, but Daniel caught something else in it, something like fear. The tunnel sloped downward, and the hum of machinery faded into a deeper sound, a low roar that seemed to come from far below. The air grew thicker, harder to breathe. Daniel's skin prickled as the walls began to glow faintly with veins of green light. Lyra slowed, glancing over her shoulder. "We're close to the pit," she said. Daniel frowned. "The pit?" She met his gaze. "It's where they send people who vanish. No one comes back from there." From above, the sound of heavy metal doors slammed open, followed by the muffled shouts of soldiers. Daniel could tell they were sealing off exits. Tightening the trap, he pulled Lyra toward a side passage. But she stopped him, shaking her head. "They'll expect us to run there," she said. "We have to go down." Daniel looked toward the downward tunnel, the green glow pulsing faintly, like a heartbeat. "And what happens if we go down?" he asked. Lyra's voice dropped to a whisper. "We hope the stories are wrong." They descended, the floor turning slick under their feet. At one point, Daniel had to catch Lyra as she slipped, her body trembling against his for a moment before she pulled away. The roar grew louder until it was all around them, making the walls vibrate. Then, without warning, Daniel's unit crackled to life. A familiar voice broke through the static. "Captain Daniel, we thought you were dead." The voice was from Earth Command, distant but urgent. "Your beacon just came online. Where are you?" Lyra froze, staring at the small device in his hand. Her expression shifted. Something sharp in her eyes now. "They'll track that," she said quickly. Daniel realized she was right. If Command could hear him, so could the enemy. He switched it off, shoving it deep into his jacket. "You're risking yourself for nothing," Lyra said, almost angrily. "You don't even know me." Daniel met her gaze in the green light. "I don't need to know you. I just know I'm not leaving you here." Before she could answer, a shadow moved at the far end of the tunnel. Not a soldier, something taller, its head brushing the curved ceiling. Its skin shimmered with the same green veins as the walls. Daniel instinctively stepped in front of Lyra, his hand moving toward his weapon. The creature stopped, its many eyes reflecting the glow. It tilted its head, studying them silently. For a long moment, nothing moved except the slow drip of water from the ceiling. Then the shadow turned and walked deeper into the darkness. Lyra's voice was barely a whisper. If it went that way, we go the other. But behind them, the echo of boots was already returning. Louder now. Their only path forward was into the dark where the creature had gone. Daniel glanced at her, then nodded. Not today, he said, and together they stepped into the unknown. The deeper they went, the more the walls closed in, the green light fading until only the faint shimmer from Lyra's eyes lit the way. The air was colder now, tasting of iron and old dust. Somewhere ahead, a faint metallic drip echoed like a slow heartbeat. Daniel kept his weapon ready, each step measured. They turned a corner and the space opened into a wide chamber. Pipes snaked across the ceiling, leaking steam that curled around their ankles. In the middle sat an old shuttle, half buried in rubble. Its hull was scorched, its markings scratched away. Daniel recognized the design. It was an old smuggler's craft, the kind used to sneak people in and out of hostile territories. A figure stepped out from behind it, tall and thin, his coat patched from dozens of repairs. His skin had the pale sheen of someone who hadn't seen sunlight in years. "Daniel," the man said with a dry smile, "never thought I'd see you alive." Daniel's eyes narrowed. "Corin," the smuggler spread his arms, "you look like hell, but you're in luck. I can get you off this rock." His gaze shifted to Lyra, and for a fraction of a second, something predatory flashed in his eyes. Lyra's posture stiffened. Daniel didn't miss it. He stepped slightly in front of her. "We need passage now," Corin smirked. "Passage costs, old friend, and I don't take Earth credits." Daniel's jaw tightened. "You'll get your payment." Corin's smile widened. "Oh, I think I already see my payment." His eyes lingered on Lyra a moment too long. Lyra's voice was sharp. "Not happening." Corin chuckled, raising his hands as if in surrender. "Relax, just business talk." But Daniel knew that tone. He'd heard it in war zones, from men who pretended to joke while their hands reached for knives. While Daniel tried to keep the conversation steady, Corin's fingers twitched behind his back, tapping a small comm switch hidden in his sleeve. In the silence between words, Daniel caught the faint hiss of static. It wasn't just the tunnel's echo. Someone was listening. Lyra's eyes flicked toward a shadow near the far wall. Daniel followed her glance, just in time to see the faint outline of armored figures moving into position. The trap was already closing. Corin's voice stayed smooth. "So, shall we seal this deal?" Daniel's answer was a sudden shove, knocking Corin back into the shuttle's hull. The first soldier stepped out, rifle raised, a beam of pale light slicing through the steam. Energy bolts exploded against the floor as Daniel yanked Lyra behind. A pile of broken crates. The sound was deafening in the enclosed chamber. Lyra ducked low, her hand gripping the glowing shackle fragments like a weapon. A flash of movement caught Daniel's eye. Corin, crawling toward a side exit. Using the chaos to slip away, Daniel fired a shot into the metal near his head, making him freeze. "Stay where I can see you," Daniel barked. The soldiers advanced, their armor hissing with each step. Lyra leaned close, her voice quick and urgent. "There's a service hatch behind the crates. It leads to the storage maze. If we get in there, they'll lose us." Daniel nodded, covering her as she scrambled toward it. He fired twice, forcing the soldiers to take cover. The energy blasts lit the steam in blinding flashes. The smell of burning metal filled the air. Lyra pulled the hatch open. Its hinges screamed from years of rust. "Go," Daniel shouted, shoving her through. He followed, the hatch slamming shut just as an energy bolt scorched the wall where his head had been. Inside, the air was close and stale. The passage was narrow, lined with dusty shelves stacked with forgotten crates. Their footsteps echoed softly, somewhere far behind. The muffled shouts of the soldiers grew fainter, replaced by the slow hum of the old storage maze's security systems powering up. Lyra glanced at him in the dim light, her expression unreadable. "You could have left me," she said. Daniel's voice was low, but steady. "Not today." The air in the storage maze was thick with dust, every breath leaving a dry taste in the mouth. Dim blue lights flickered along the walls. Too weak to chase away the shadows, Daniel moved ahead, sweeping the path with his weapon while Lyra followed, close, her steps soundless despite her bare, wounded feet. Somewhere far above, the distant thud of closing blast doors echoed like a slow drum, sealing them inside this forgotten part of the city. They passed rows of crates stacked to the ceiling, each marked with symbols Daniel didn't recognize. Some were dented, others covered in years of grime. Lyra's hand brushed one as they passed, and a faint hum came from inside. She flinched, pulling her hand away quickly. Daniel noticed but said nothing for now. After several turns, they reached a wider space, a loading bay frozen in time. A rusted transport sled sat abandoned in the middle, its power core long dead. On the far wall, a service panel flickered with a faint green glow. Daniel approached it, tapping the screen to check the map, but the display only showed static. Lyra stood near the sled, her fingers tracing the glowing fragments of her shackles. The green light reflected in her eyes, making them look sharper, colder. Daniel turned toward her, ready to speak, but stopped when she whispered something under her breath, words that didn't sound like her voice at all, low and mechanical, almost like a machine speaking through her. "What was that?" he asked. Lyra blinked, as if waking from a trance. "Nothing," she said too quickly. Daniel took a slow step closer. "No, not nothing. You've been hiding something since the bridge, and now I need to know." She looked at him for a long moment, rainwater still clinging to her hair. Then she reached up and pulled at the shackle fragments. The glow grew brighter, the metal pieces shifting as if alive. They reformed into a thin band around her wrist, and a stream of tiny lights crawled up her arm, sinking into her skin. Daniel's breath caught. "That's tech," Lyra nodded, her voice steady now. "Not just tech, it's the key." Daniel frowned. "Key to what?" She stepped closer, her voice dropping. "To the defense grid, the whole planet's weapons system. It's in my DNA, locked by the shackles. That's why the commander wants me alive, and why he'll kill anyone who tries to take me." The realization hit Daniel hard. She wasn't just a fugitive, she was a weapon. A living code that could turn the tide of a war. "If they get you," he began, "if they get me, they control everything," she finished. Before he could respond, the maze around them came alive. A deep mechanical hum vibrating through the floor. Thin beams of red light swept between the crates, scanning for movement. Lyra's eyes widened. "Security drones," she said. Daniel pulled her down behind the sled just as the first drone floated into view, its sharp claws unfolding. The beam passed over the sled, paused, then shifted toward them. Daniel knew they couldn't stay hidden for long. Lyra gripped his arm. "If I'm caught, they'll take me to the commander within the hour." Her voice was fierce now, almost defiant. Daniel looked at her, then at the maze of crates, calculating their chances. "Then we don't get caught," he said, and with one sharp motion, he pulled her into the narrow path between two towering stacks. The drone screeched, its lights flaring red as it gave chase. The sound of worry blades filled the air, slicing closer with every step. Somewhere deeper in the maze, more machines were waking, their metallic voices calling to each other in a language Daniel didn't understand. They ran, the narrow corridors, twisting like a labyrinth. Each turn felt tighter, the crates looming over them like walls of a prison. Lyra's breathing was quick but controlled, her eyes scanning for an exit. Then, ahead, a thin strip of light appeared at floor leveler. Maintenance hatch barely a meter high. Daniel dropped to his knees, wrenching it open. Cold air rushed out from the tunnel beyond. He pushed Lyra through first, then followed. The sound of metal claws scraping the hatch just as he slammed it shut behind them. In the sudden silence of the dark passage, Lyra looked back at him. "You know what carrying me means now," she said quietly. Daniel met her gaze without hesitation. "I knew from the start." The hatch opened into a tunnel that sloped upward, the stale underground air giving way to something sharper, colder. Daniel could smell dust and static in the breeze-open ground. Lyra climbed ahead of him, the faint light from above turning the silver in her hair into streaks of fire. When they reached the top, the world exploded into space and silence. They stood at the edge of the city, the buildings behind them, rising like jagged teeth against a dark red sky. Before them stretched the wastelands, a dead sea of cracked earth, broken by canyons and towering rock spires. The horizon shimmered under a distant storm wall, purple lightning crawling through it like veins. Daniel spotted an old hover hauler half buried in the dirt, its panels scorched, but the engine core still intact. He jumped down into the cockpit, brushing away a layer of sand from the controls. "Get in," he called. Lyra hesitated, scanning the empty horizon. "There's nowhere to hide out here," she warned. "Exactly," Daniel said, powering up the hauler. "They can't surround us without showing themselves." The machine groaned to life, lifting slowly off the ground. Dust swirled around them as Daniel pushed the throttle. The wasteland rolled past in waves of brown and gray. Lyra sat beside him, her eyes locked on the storm ahead. "That's the dead veil," she said. "The winds inside tear ships apart." Daniel smirked faintly. "Good thing we're not a ship." The first pursuit craft appeared over the city's edge, a sleek black shape cutting through the air with predatory grace. Two more followed, their engines screaming as they closed. The distance. Lyra's hand tightened on the edge of her seat. "Those are hunter skiffs, they won't stop." Daniel adjusted the throttle, pushing the hauler harder. The old machine shuddered, but held. "Then neither will we," he said. The skiffs opened fire, bolts of searing light striking the sand around them. Explosions of dirt and rock leaped into the air. One blast nearly flipping the hauler. Lyra was thrown sideways. Daniel caught her before she hit the dash. "Stay low," he ordered, veering sharply into a canyon. The narrow walls screamed past them, the sound of the engines echoing off the stone. The skiffs followed, their shadows darting over the rock like hunting beasts. Daniel pulled a hard turn, scraping the hauler's side against the wall. "You're going to kill us before they do," Lyra shouted. Daniel only grinned, eyes locked ahead, up ahead. The canyon split into two paths, one wide and clear, the other a jagged, twisting slit, barely wide enough for the hauler. Daniel took the second without hesitation. Metal screamed as the wall scraped the hole. One of the skiffs tried to follow, but clipped a wing and spun out, vanishing in a burst of fire and sand. Lyra leaned forward, pointing to a shimmering point beyond the rocks. "There, that's the old rebel shelter. It's hidden under the ridge." Daniel nodded, cutting hard. To the right, the storm wall loomed closer now, lightning flashing like a living thing inside it. The wind picked up, carrying with it the electric temps of charged air. The remaining skiffs closed in, firing again. One blast tore through the hauler's side panel, sparks filling the cabin. Lyra covered her face from the heat. Daniel fought the controls, his voice steady even as the machine bucked beneath them. "Hold on." Instead of heading straight for the shelter, Daniel aimed for the edge of the storm. The skiffs followed, their pilots clearly thinking they'd cornered him. At the last second, Daniel pulled a sharp drop into a hidden ravine. The wind screamed over their heads, masking their trail as the skiffs shot past into the storm. He brought the hauler to a stop inside the shadow of the ridge. The engines wheezed. In relief, Lyra exhaled slowly, her hands still trembling. "You're insane," she said, but there was the smallest curve of a smile at the edge of her mouth. Daniel glanced at her. "You're alive," he said simply. Somewhere beyond the ridge, faint shapes moved in the haze, rebel lookouts watching them. The storm rumbled behind, and the wasteland smelled of dust, ozone, and the sharp taste of a fight that wasn't over yet. The ridge's shadow broke as they rolled forward, revealing the rebel base carved directly into the rock face. Its entrance was a jagged tear in the stone, half hidden by tattered camouflage netting that flapped in the rising wind. Figures emerged. From the darkness lean hardened fighters in scavenged armor, their weapons tracking Daniel and Lyra as the hauler coasted to a stop. A tall rebel with a scar running down his throat approached, his voice gravel rough. "Who's the human? And why bring her here?" Daniel stepped out first, his boots crunching against the sand. "She's the reason you're still breathing." The scarred man's gaze shifted to Lyra. Lingering on the glowing band of metal at her wrist, his expression changed something between shock and calculation. Inside the base, the air was cooler, the walls humming faintly with old power lines. Lyra was led to a small chamber, where scanners bathed her in pale light. The rebels' murmurs turned tense as the readings confirmed that her DNA carried the access key to the planet's entire defense grid. One of the rebels, a woman with a half-burned face, hissed, "Do you have any idea what she's worth?" Daniel's reply was cold. "She's not for sale." Before anyone could argue, the base shook violently, dust sifting from the ceiling. A low, thunderous hum filled the air. The rebels froze. Every one of them knew that sound. The commander had arrived outside. The sky was split by the shadow of a massive warship, its engines glowing like suns. Smaller dropships rained down, disgorging squads of black-armored soldiers who advanced in perfect formation. Their weapons burned with cold blue light. Lyra stepped toward the doorway, her face pale but resolute. "If I give myself up, they'll spare you." Daniel caught her arm before she could take another step. "Not today." His voice cut through the growing panic in the base. The rebels scrambled into defensive positions, old turrets grinding to life. The first wave of soldiers surged through the storm's edge, energy bolts tearing into the ridge. Daniel grabbed a rifle from the wall and moved to the front line. "You know how to use that," the scarred rebels shouted over the roar. Daniel's answer was the sharp crack of a perfectly placed shot that dropped the lead soldier. The fight turned into chaos, explosions tearing chunks from the rock, screams drowned out by the storms. Howl. Lyra stayed near the control chamber, her hands pressed against the scanner as rebel techs raced to decode the defense grid sequence. Sparks flew overhead as a turret exploded, showering them with burning fragments. Then the commander himself stepped into view, a towering figure in black and crimson armor, his face hidden behind a mask. His voice rolled across the battlefield like thunder. "Hand her over, or I will grind this rock into dust." Lyra's fingers hovered over the final activation pad, her eyes darting to Daniel. "If I do this, there's no going back." Daniel met her gaze, rain and dust streaking his face. "Then don't look back." She slammed her hand down. The base's power surged, the walls vibrating as the grid woke from its long slumber. Outside, the warship's engines faltered, its weapons going dark, one by one. The commander roared in fury, raising his blade. Before he could strike, Daniel charged through the chaos, slamming into him with the force of a battering ram. The two crashed into the dirt, trading brutal blows, until the commander's mask cracked, revealing cold, reptilian eyes, burning with hate. Daniel's final punch sent him sprawling, unconscious. Silence fell, except for the fading rumble of the storm. The rebels emerged slowly, their faces a mix of disbelief and awe. Lyra stepped into the open, the stormlight catching her silver hair. She looked at Daniel for a long moment before speaking, her voice steady but soft. "I wanted to die, Daniel. Now I want to live, and for the first time since the bridge." Daniel smiled. "Not today," he said again, as the storm behind them finally began to fade.